Hello and welcome to the Leaders Room by the Iclif Leadership and Governance Centre. To kick off our series, we have with us Dr. Zeti Akhtar Aziz, the Governor of Bank Negara Malaysia. She's the first woman to head a central bank in Malaysia and has been recognised among one of the best central bankers in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. During the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s, it was a difficult time for the country, and you played a pivotal role in government when the government decided to impose capital controls. And the central bank, as a result of that, came under severe criticism by international institutions. How do you deal with all that pressure?
Well, the pressure was immense. In any crisis, like what is being experienced in Europe or in the US, at that point when the crisis escalates to a very high and extreme level, the stress levels also escalate to very high levels. And the important aspect of it in managing that kind of stress is to stay very focused. First of all, there has to be established a great clarity of what we want to achieve with our response or policy actions. We have to stay very, very focused. And then knowing how we are going to address these issues. In a crisis, very often, the consequences can be devastating, either as a consequence of the crisis itself or inaction or by wrong policy action. The consequences can be devastating. So there's a great urgency to be able to, for the organization to rise to this extreme challenge, to deal with it. And I believe that to be able to deal with this, first of all, you have to develop the organizational capability. And this cannot be done at the time when the crisis erupts. You have to do it well before. And this will allow you to pick a team that can develop solutions to deal with it. And especially solutions that are preemptive, because if you react to developments, it is unlikely to be able to provide a solution to the problems that have caused the crisis. So all this, if you are focused, you have organizational capability, are the ingredients that help you manage the stress. Because when a crisis happens, all sorts of people will come forward with solutions and try to pull you in different directions. We describe these as noise. And if these noise get very loud, it will be a major distraction. So being focused and then having the organizational capability allows you to stay on course in developing solutions and acting very preemptively. And this Malaysia was able to do, and therefore the cost of the crisis, which is equally important, was very, very much less for us.
Were you afraid at that time? Because, the decision to impose capital controls was seen to be rather unconventional.
Yes, of course, there's fear, but as a leader, you must never show any flicker of fear in your eyes, even your body language. And therefore, in organizations like the central bank, you need people who are also courageous and able to not be afraid. And if you are sure of yourself and you have confidence in your decisions, well, then you just go for it and explain it, most importantly, to the people of the country. They are the people who need the understanding. And of course, we want the international community to also understand it, but very often they don't have a deep understanding of the context and circumstances of the country concerned. And therefore, we need to do all the explanations and to create awareness and understanding. And of course, if you have a track record, that also helps to have the credibility and to generate confidence. And in a crisis, confidence is very important. And therefore, when we look at, and another important aspect is to make an assessment of all the risks and then how these risks can be mitigated. That is key too, because all these actions, like imposing controls, involves many risks. And one of them is execution and implementation, the risks relating to that, and then the consequences it has on the public, on the financial institutions, on trade and investment, and so on. So each one, we look at what are the risks, possible risks, and then actions that need to be taken to mitigate these risks.
In an imperfect world, you cannot predict everything, and often policies, what they can give you is unintended consequences.
That is correct.
Yeah, so how do you, your homework has to be really thorough.
Exactly. And that is why having a team with diverse backgrounds and leveraging on the expertise that are in the different parts of the bank, this is what will allow you to really consider every angle and every aspect and to go over it very, very carefully. Of course, you cannot predict the outcomes, but if you know how the system works, then this is an important. In fact, when the Prime Minister at that time, Tun Mahathir, wanted to, when the governor resigned and he asked me to be acting governor, I said perhaps he should look for somebody who has expertise in the area of controls. Well, he told me that we didn't have any such expertise, that we were venturing into uncharted territory, but he felt that I knew how the system worked and that I should be the person who would be acting governor during that time. So I accepted, and it was a major responsibility, of course, because if it was mismanaged, then the consequences on the people of this country would be devastating. So every effort was put into formulating the controls to address the very issue, only the issue of the destabilizing effects of speculative activity on our foreign exchange market. So we stayed very focused, and we knew we assessed all the possible risks that could happen and how we would mitigate those risks. For example, everyone highlighted that a black market would develop. And, well, we thought to mitigate this, we should just import pieces of US dollars, and 20 million pieces actually of US dollars. I believe we imported them from Hong Kong. And then we made sure all the money changers and the banking institutions had these so that everyone could have access to US dollars at 380 to the US dollar. And therefore no black market developed. So that's just one example. Then we had wide-ranging other examples, including like loss of confidence of our members of our public. We had 30 hotlines that operated for 24 hours. And so anyone who had any questions, whether they had children studying abroad and they had to remit funds abroad, how would the controls affect them, and so on. So every question was answered. And this lasted for 2 or 3 weeks, where the hotlines were in operations for 24 hours because of the different time zones. People were in the UK or US, and they had businesses, or they wanted to go for medical treatment. We had all sorts of questions, and we trained people to work in shifts so that everyone would understand why we were doing it and what we wanted to achieve. And within 1 week, we restored stability in our foreign exchange market and the overall financial markets in our country. So that was a major exercise, but the point is the bank had the capability to rise up to the challenge.
In many emerging markets, political interference is not unusual. As a central banker in Malaysia, how do you manage your various stakeholders and as well as maintain that level of independence, especially when you get instructions or advice from ministers or the government, advice that may go against economic wisdom?
Right. Well, the engagement with the government and, for that matter, with the public or with the industry or the financial markets has to be an ongoing process. It cannot be only at a time when you need their support and understanding. And that is an important part that needs to be recognized, that it is an ongoing process in that they need to understand what the central bank does, what is its mandate, how it operates, and what are the objectives that it needs to achieve. And this is an important part, including for financial markets, because if they do not understand, this is what will cause markets to overreact, for one thing. Public to distrust will develop, and it will also, the consequences will be an erosion of the independence of the central bank. Of course, the other aspect of it is the central bank also must be able to have the organizational capability to produce results, and its track record, its credibility, all that will earn its independence.
So what you're saying is very important to build trust with your stakeholders, especially the government?
Yes, of course. And so they need to be regularly informed on what the central bank is doing and why we are doing. And I should say, usually rational thinking does prevail.
Especially when you share a lot of data, doesn't it?
Data and explanation, the rationale on why we need to do something, then with that understanding. Because if there's no understanding, then there will be questions raised. Why is the central bank taking these actions? But there has to be great clarity that the central bank actions is not motivated by political considerations. Its considerations are what is in the best interest of our financial system, what is in the best interest of our economy and for the public at large. So these are our motivations, and it's incumbent on us to always give the explanations, not only to the government, but to the financial markets and even to the international community. So they also should not overreact on some of the actions we have taken.